There are moments in human culture when a phrase tossed casually into the atmosphere of popular music proves itself to be far more than mere entertainment. These moments arrive not as solemn pronouncements from philosophers or discoveries whispered in the quiet of a laboratory, but from the pulse of the dance floor, the heat of the club, the hum of the radio. In this particular case, the lyric is simple, even cheeky. All that junk in your trunk. On the surface, the words appear frivolous, a playful innuendo, a metaphor familiar to the pop landscape of the early 2000s. But when we pause, when we strip the lyric of its context and examine it as scholars, scientists, and seekers of truth, we find that it conceals a puzzle of startling depth. Because the moment we ask the question seriously, the lyric collapses into paradox. How can a single trunk contain all that junk? The lyric presents itself as a statement of possession. There exists a trunk, and in it resides a quantity of junk so vast, so overwhelming, that it defies casual comprehension. We know what trunks are: finite, bounded containers with measurable dimensions. We know what junk is: an accumulation of objects, random and unordered. Yet the lyric insists on all that junk. Not some junk, not a reasonable amount, but an excess that strains the very definition of containment. Here lies the riddle. If the trunk is finite, then by definition it cannot hold all that junk, for junk by nature proliferates without limit. But if the trunk can hold all of it, then it is no ordinary container. It is infinite, a paradoxical storage space unbound by geometry or physical law. The lyric thus thrusts us into the heart of one of science's oldest dilemmas. How do finite containers engage with infinite contents? Consider the trunk literally. A trunk is a box, perhaps 2 feet wide, 3 feet long, and 2 feet deep. Its volume is calculable: length times width times height. A finite number of cubic feet, within which one might reasonably store clothing, books, perhaps the odd keepsake. Yet Fergie's lyric does not invite us to imagine a neatly packed chest of ordered belongings. She presents us with junk. Junk is not orderly. It is not optimized for space. Junk resists categorization, defies stacking. It is entropic by nature. Half-folded shirts, loose cords, mismatched shoes, broken toys. It fills space not with elegance, but with chaos. Thus, the lyric doubles the paradox. Not only is the trunk tasked with holding all that junk, it is tasked with holding it in its most disorderly state. The inefficiency of junk magnifies the impossibility of containment. So we must ask, is the trunk finite but perpetually overstuffed, straining at the seams, bulging like a black hole on the verge of collapse? Or is the trunk secretly infinite, a TARDIS-like space larger within than without, capable of absorbing an unending accumulation of debris? The lyric does not specify, but it forces us to confront the paradox. To dismiss this as playful wordplay is to underestimate the profound stakes it raises. For the disciplines that grapple with these very questions are some of the most important in science. Physics of volume. How do objects occupy space? How do finite dimensions constrain the possibilities of storage? Packing theory. What is the most efficient way to arrange items within a bounded container? Mathematicians have studied sphere packing for centuries, from Kepler's conjecture on stacking cannonballs to modern-day optimization algorithms. Thermodynamics of clutter. What happens when disorder dominates? Junk does not simply fill a trunk. It increases entropy, turning a neat space into chaos. The second law of thermodynamics tells us that disorder will always increase, and the lyric captures this inevitability with startling clarity. Each of these disciplines is smuggled into the lyric, unannounced. To sing of a trunk full of junk is to touch on geometry, physics, mathematics, and thermodynamics all at once. And here, of course, we find the delicious irony. For the lyric, delivered in the swagger of a pop anthem, is not treated by its audience as a philosophical puzzle. It is danced to, laughed at, recited casually. Yet when held up to the light of scholarly analysis, it reveals itself to be as profound as any theorem. The wink of our inquiry is that we treat it as though it were Archimedes' lost manuscript, recovered from the sands, and carrying secrets of geometry hidden for millennia. But is this wink entirely unjustified? After all, history has proven again and again that truth often hides in plain sight. Newton saw an apple fall and glimpsed universal gravitation. Archimedes watched his bath overflow and discovered displacement. Why not Fergie, pondering all that junk in your trunk, stumbling inadvertently upon the physics of containment? The lyric, then, becomes more than innuendo. It becomes an allegory for the cosmos itself. For if one trunk can contain an impossible amount of junk, perhaps the universe itself is a trunk, finite in its observable dimensions, yet containing far more than we can imagine. Perhaps our galaxies and black holes are merely junk within the cosmic trunk, endlessly accumulating, endlessly defying our attempts at neat storage. This is why we cannot shrug and walk away. To ask, what is all that junk in your trunk, is to ask, by extension, what is all that junk in the universe? What is dark matter, dark energy, all the invisible mass that seems to fill our cosmic trunk to bursting? In this light, Fergie's lyric is not a joke, but a prophecy. A reminder that the finite and infinite are locked in constant dance, and that containment may be the greatest riddle of all. Boxes have dimensions, length, width, and height, three numbers that multiply together to give us volume. If a trunk measures 3 feet long, 2 feet wide, and 2 feet deep, then its capacity is 12 cubic feet. 12 cubic feet is finite, bounded, measurable. It is the universe in miniature, a contained cosmos in which objects may exist, but only up to a point. Fergie's lyric, however, mocks this finitude. She speaks not of a few objects neatly stored, but of all that junk, an indefinite quantity that stretches past the boundaries of calculation. Immediately we are in conflict, a finite box confronted with infinite accumulation. The mathematics of volume insists that a limit exists, yet the lyric insists on excess. Of course, capacity is not only about raw volume, but about how objects are arranged within it. Enter the mathematics of packing. Centuries ago, Johannes Kepler speculated on the most efficient way to stack spheres. His conjecture that the densest packing is the familiar pyramid pattern of oranges in a market stall would not be formally proven until 1998. But trunks rarely contain neat spheres. They contain junk, irregular shapes, odd angles, objects that refuse to tessellate. The mathematics of packing becomes far more complex when applied to the mess of everyday life. Efficiency plummets as disorder rises. One might fill a trunk with books and clothing folded neatly and reach a packing density near 60%. But fill the same trunk with shoes, tangled wires, half-broken electronics, and the density may collapse to 30% or less. Here lies the genius of the lyric. By specifying junk, Fergie ensures maximum inefficiency. The trunk's theoretical volume is undermined by the chaos of its contents. The result is wasted space, unfilled corners, air pockets where order might have thrived. Thus, the trunk is finite, but junk ensures it fails to meet even that finite potential. Entropy, the measure of disorder, is the villain lurking behind every trunk. In thermodynamics, entropy always increases, and ordered systems decay into chaos. A neatly packed trunk left to itself will be opened, rummaged through, its contents scattered and displaced. The lyric captures this inevitability by calling the contents junk from the start. The trunk is already lost to entropy, doomed never to achieve the elegance of efficiency. In this sense, the trunk becomes a metaphor for all human attempts at order. Closets, attics, garages, each is a trunk in miniature. We attempt to impose control, to fold and stack, to file and categorize. But time and use conspire against us. Disorder increases, and soon the container is not a triumph of order, but a monument to entropy. Fergie's lyric, stripped of its innuendo, is a hymn to this truth. The trunk, like the universe, tends toward clutter. To appreciate the scale of this paradox, let us compare trunks to larger containers in the world of science and technology. Cargo ships. These vast vessels carry thousands of shipping containers, each a trunk magnified. Efficiency in loading matters greatly. Mispacking wastes millions. Yet even here, entropy creeps in. Ships are finite, demands infinite. There is always more junk to be moved than space to hold it. Hard drives. Digital trunks store not physical objects but data. Their capacity is measured in terabytes, yet the problem is the same. Files proliferate, disorder accumulates, and soon the drive groans with junk. Compression algorithms, mathematical packing strategies, extend capacity, but never erase the finitude of space. Black holes. Perhaps the ultimate trunks, black holes absorb everything that crosses their event horizons. They seem infinite, but physics insists they are not. Their capacity is bounded by the area of their surface, a finite measure known as the Bekenstein-Hawking entropy. Even black holes, those cosmic trunks of unimaginable appetite, cannot hold infinite junk. The lyric then resonates from the smallest trunks to the largest. Whether in a bedroom or a galaxy, the paradox of containment persists. Finite containers, infinite junk. And so we return to Kepler, who in the 17th century wrestled with the problem of packing spheres. His conjecture, now proven, represents humanity's attempt to master the problem of efficient storage. But centuries after Kepler, Fergie enters the stage and, with the casual ease of pop, presents a scenario where efficiency collapses under the weight of disorder. One cannot help but hear in her lyric a sly commentary on the limitations of Kepler's triumph. For what use is the densest sphere-packing solution when the trunk is filled not with spheres, but with junk? What is the value of mathematical optimization when the contents themselves defy order? In one lyric, Fergie reminds us that life is not made of spheres but of clutter, and that the elegant solutions of mathematics crumble before the chaos of reality. Thus, we have seen that the trunk, as a finite container, is governed by the physics of volume, the mathematics of packing, and the inevitability of entropy. Its dimensions are finite, its potential measurable, yet the inefficiency of junk ensures that it never reaches that potential. Whether compared to cargo ships, hard drives, or black holes, the paradox persists. Finite capacity confronted with infinite accumulation. And with a wink to Kepler, we see that Fergie's lyric is more than playful. It is devastating. It reminds us that no matter how perfect the mathematics, real life is cluttered, messy, entropic. The trunk cannot win. The junk always triumphs. When Fergie sang about all that junk in your trunk, she might have been thinking about the body, about style, about spectacle. But when we step back, sharpen our focus, and approach the lyric as scholars, another interpretation emerges. Junk as noise. Not physical objects, not metaphorical curves, but useless or redundant data. And once we make that shift, her lyric is no longer about a playful metaphor. It becomes a profound question about information, capacity, and meaning. In information theory, noise is the enemy of clarity. It is the static that clogs the channel, the redundancy that bloats the message, the unnecessary content that prevents the signal from being understood. Noise does not merely sit idly in a system. It actively consumes capacity, filling the bandwidth that could otherwise carry meaning. Now consider the trunk. If the trunk is a channel, then its contents represent data. But what is inside? Junk. Not streamlined, not compressed, not ordered. Just random clutter. The lyric forces us to ask, if the trunk is filled with junk, what percentage of what it carries is actually useful? What is the ratio of signal to noise? In 1948, Claude Shannon, working at Bell Labs, published a mathematical theory of communication. It was a paper that changed the world. In it, Shannon defined information in precise mathematical terms, introducing the concept of entropy as a measure of uncertainty and giving us the tools to calculate the maximum capacity of a communication channel. Shannon made clear that every channel has a finite bandwidth. It can only carry so much, and once filled with noise, junk, its capacity for meaningful signal is diminished. The challenge is always the same. how to transmit the maximum amount of useful information with the least interference. Now, here again Fergie's lyric, all that junk in your trunk. If the trunk is the channel, it is overloaded. There is little room left for signal. The problem Shannon described so elegantly is rendered here in pop shorthand. Too much junk in the channel leaves no space for meaning. This leads us to the question of bandwidth. Just as a trunk can only hold so much, a communication channel, whether a telephone line, an internet cable, or the universe itself, has a finite capacity. Junk consumes that capacity, reducing the efficiency of transmission. Information theory responds with compression. Compression algorithms attempt to minimize junk, to strip out redundancy, to ensure that the channel carries the most possible information per unit of bandwidth. It is the art of packing meaning into limited space. Without compression, the trunk overflows. With compression, it may hold more than we imagine. One cannot help but imagine Fergie's trunk as a hard drive in need of defragmentation. The junk clogs the system. The data sprawls chaotically. The efficiency collapses. A compression algorithm could bring order. A better ratio of signal to noise could be achieved. But the lyric insists, there is still junk, and still a trunk straining under its weight. At this point, the lyric transcends trunks and nightclubs and enters the domain of cosmology. Because the same question Shannon posed about telephones, we now ask of the universe itself, is what we see signal or junk? Radio astronomers listen to the cosmos, their dishes catching faint whispers of galaxies billions of years away. Yet for every meaningful pulse, there are oceans of noise, interference, static, cosmic junk. Distinguishing one from the other is the essence of astronomy. Without filtering, the signal is drowned. Even more profoundly, consider the cosmic microwave background, the faint radiation left over from the Big Bang. To some, it is the purest signal in history, a message from the birth of the cosmos. To others, it is junk data, the leftover static of creation. Fergie's trunk becomes, in this light, a metaphor for the entire universe. Is all this content meaningful signal, or just noise filling up finite capacity? And what of our own lives? We generate terabytes of data daily, texts, images, posts, videos. But how much of it is meaningful? How much is junk? The lyric becomes uncomfortably prophetic. The trunk is the internet itself, clogged with memes, spam, and redundant posts. All that junk in the trunk, a description of the digital age. Here lies the brilliance of taking the lyric seriously. For when Fergie sings of junk in a trunk, she is not only speaking of physical or metaphorical fullness. She is, however inadvertently, channeling the deepest question of information theory. How do we separate meaning from clutter, signal from noise, truth from junk? There is humor here, certainly. It is absurd to imagine Shannon nodding along in the club, notebook in hand, scribbling equations on napkins while bass thumps overhead. Yet the humor conceals an edge. For the problem Shannon solved and the lyric captures is still unsolved at the largest scale. Is the universe mostly junk, with occasional signal? Or is it signal all the way down, waiting to be decoded? When we shift from trunks to telescopes, from dance floors to deep space, we discover that the problem of junk is not confined to closets or innuendo. The universe itself can be read as a trunk, a container with finite capacity, forever filled with signals and noise. And just as information theorists ask whether a message can be decoded, astronomers and physicists ask whether the cosmos itself is a communication channel, and if so, whether it is dominated by junk. Radio astronomers are professional custodians of cosmic trunks. They aim enormous dishes at the sky, straining to capture faint signals emitted by distant galaxies, pulsars, and quasars. Yet for every delicate pulse of meaning, there is an overwhelming flood of noise, earthbound radio interference, cosmic static, background radiation. The parallel to Fergie's trunk is uncanny. Imagine the radio dish as the lid of the trunk swung open to reveal the contents. Inside, among the junk, lies a whisper of signal, the pattern of a pulsar, the rhythm of a quasar. But the junk threatens to bury it, to drown it, to make it indistinguishable. Astronomers spend careers filtering, subtracting, and refining, hoping that somewhere in the chaos there is something meaningful. And here's the dry humor of it all. While Fergie shouts her lyric across a crowded club, astronomers too sit in the cosmic club of background noise, trying to distinguish the faintest signals over the cosmic baseline of static. The problem intensifies at the quantum level. Quantum mechanics tells us that measurement itself introduces noise. To observe is to disturb. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle is, at bottom, a law of junk, a reminder that no channel is pure, no signal free from contamination. Every time physicists attempt to measure the position of an electron or the spin of a particle, they face the inevitable intrusion of noise. The act of measurement fills the trunk with additional junk, narrowing the channel for signal. There is no clean trunk, no uncluttered message. Reality itself transmits in static. Thus, Fergie's lyric, though born of pop culture, echoes quantum law. All that junk in your trunk is not only about storage. It is about the irreducible noise inherent in every attempt to extract meaning from the world. And then we arrive at cosmology, where the trunk expands to universal scale. The cosmic microwave background, CMB, is the afterglow of the Big Bang, a bath of microwave radiation suffusing the cosmos. Some see it as the most important signal ever received, the faint whisper of the universe's birth. Others see it as junk, a residual static that fills the cosmic trunk without delivering clear meaning. To interpret the CMB requires treating it as both. It is noise, ubiquitous, unavoidable, cluttering every measurement of the sky. Yet within that noise lies pattern. Tiny fluctuations that seeded galaxies, clusters, and the structures we inhabit today. The challenge is separating the signal from the junk, the meaning from the mess. In this sense, Fergie's lyric becomes cosmological prophecy. The universe itself carries all that junk in its trunk, and humanity's task is to dig through it, to separate the static from the story, to find the faint imprint of creation hidden in the clutter of cosmic noise. And so we confront the haunting question: is the universe mostly signal or mostly junk? If we take the information theory metaphor seriously, the cosmos may be a channel with finite bandwidth, largely filled with redundancy, clutter, and noise. The meaningful signals, the whispers of distant galaxies, the fine structure of the CMB are rare, precious, almost lost amid the din. Or perhaps the opposite is true. Perhaps what we dismiss as junk is itself signal, carrying meaning we cannot yet decode. The CMB might be not just leftover static, but a coded message from the Big Bang. Quantum noise may conceal structure rather than erase it. The apparent junk in the trunk may be the very material out of which meaning emerges. This is the suspense of the lyric. When Fergie sings of all that junk, is she despairing of clutter, or hinting that the clutter itself is essential? The same question haunts cosmology. Is the universe mostly noise with fragments of signal, or is the noise itself the deeper signal we have not yet learned to read? All that junk in your trunk is not only nightclub bravado, it is the human condition. We live in trunks filled with noise, searching desperately for signal. And the suspense remains. Perhaps the signal is rare, fleeting, fragile. Or perhaps in a twist worthy of both Shannon and Fergie, the junk itself is the message. At the end of our inquiry, after unpacking physics, quantum mechanics, cosmology, and the stubborn presence of entropy in every channel, we return to the lyric itself. All that junk in your trunk. What does it mean? What does it reveal? And why has it demanded such earnest investigation? The answer is now clear. Fergie's trunk is not just metaphorical storage. It is a communication channel. The junk inside is noise, redundancy, static, clutter, useless data. The lyric is best understood as a metaphor for noise-overwhelming signal. What she casually framed in a club anthem is nothing less than Shannon's riddle reborn. How much of what we transmit is actually information, and how much is junk? Why does this matter? Because the lyric demonstrates that even in pop culture, humanity circles back to the same essential question. How do we find meaning? From philosophers sifting through paradoxes, to scientists decoding faint cosmic whispers, to clubgoers interpreting playful innuendo, the task is unchanged. Signal is precious. It is fragile, faint, easily lost. Noise is abundant. It proliferates endlessly, taking up space, drowning meaning. Whether in the static of a radio telescope, the uncertainty of quantum measurement, or the flood of memes and spam across the internet, The ratio of signal to noise defines the quality of existence. The lyric crystallizes this tension. The trunk is full, but full of what? Junk. The problem is not absence, but excess. And excess is not abundance, but clutter. The human dilemma is not that there is too little information, but that there is too much, and most of it is junk. Here the metaphor reaches its dramatic climax. Imagine the trunk not as a wooden box, not as a body, not as innuendo, but as a cosmic radio dish. It collects everything, the signals from galaxies, the whispers of quasars, the residual static of the Big Bang. But in collecting, it clutters. The trunk fills with both profound messages and endless junk. Astronomers, philosophers, and perhaps even pop singers all stare into this trunk and wonder, is there meaning inside? Is there a signal? Or is it all static? The answer is never certain, but the pursuit is everything. For in sifting the junk, in sorting the noise, we glimpse the possibility of meaning. The trunk is the universe itself, both container and channel, both filled with signal and buried in junk. And so we arrive at the straight-faced wink, the revelation that binds seriousness with absurdity. Perhaps the best explanation of information theory, the riddle of noise and signal, capacity and compression, was not Shannon's 1948 paper. Perhaps it was written decades later, sung across clubs and immortalized in the line, "All that junk in your trunk." The humor lies in the juxtaposition. Claude Shannon wrote equations, drew diagrams, and delivered lectures that would launch the digital age. Fergie sang to bass-heavy beats and flashing lights, yet both point to the same truth. Channels are finite, noise proliferates, and the eternal task is to compress, clarify, and decode. Compression, after all, is what music does. It takes signal, strips redundancy, and delivers meaning through limited bandwidth. In the same way, our task, scientific, philosophical, human, is to compress the junk, to sift the noise, to find the signal that matters. Thus the journey ends where it began, with a lyric that seemed trivial but proved profound. All that junk in your trunk is, at last, an information theory parable. It reveals that in trunks, in channels, in the universe itself, the struggle is not about emptiness, but about excess. We are drowning not in silence, but in junk, and our task is to find the faint signals hidden inside. In this light, the lyric is not comic relief. It is cosmic insight. And perhaps, as we leave the nightclub half laughing and half awed, we recognize that Fergie's anthem and Shannon's theorem are two verses of the same song. A song about meaning, noise, and the eternal search for clarity amid chaos.